theological and spiritual welcome in a few minutes. This is a general welcome. My name is Troy Elder, and I'm the Executive Director of IRIS, which is the Interfaith, Refugee, and Immigration Service, a ministry of the Episcopal Diocese of Los Angeles. In less than a week, we'll mark 13 years since the 2010 Haiti earthquake, a catastrophic trembler, a large-scale earthquake that occurred on January 12, 2010. An exact death toll proved elusive in the ensuing chaos. The Haitian government's official count was more than 300,000 dead, which would make the earthquake's aftermath one of the worst natural disasters in recorded history. But other estimates were considerably smaller. Hundreds of thousands of survivors were displaced. Dr. Paul Farmer, the late Harvard expert doctor, saint of Haiti, and history-making humanitarian, who was also a prolific researcher and writer, as many of you probably know, including works in liberation theology, anthropology, medicine, the sociology of disease, and other subjects related to Haiti and other places around the world, wrote, "After the earthquake, Haitians dug their neighbors out from beneath the rubble with their bare hands, and when it was impossible to reach them, they kept vigil and spoke to those trapped." How are we to meet the current moment in U.S. migration history? Taking a moral inventory as people of faith, here, people of conscience, as advocates, as pastors, as healers. How will we practice presence? What will it mean to have a ministry of presence, a ministry of accompaniment, to use the term from liberation theology, of which Dr. Farmer was so fond? As counselors, as advisors, as soul tenders. Today, as neoliberalism colludes with xenophobia and political expediency, how do we, like the Haitians after the quake, both dig out our newcomer neighbors, but also keep vigil and speak to those who are trapped? In this case, trapped through Kafkaesque bureaucratic and legal structures, through public messaging designed to degrade and minimize the humanity of the migrant, through the swagger of a carceral state whose sins are now very well documented. I'd like to invite you to perhaps think that the answer begins with conversations like those that we're about to have here this afternoon. Émile Durkheim, the Frenchman who, along with Marx and Weber, founded modern sociology, was noted as saying, "Any communion of consciousness, in whatever form it takes place, enhances social vitality." May the digging, vigiling, speaking, and communion begin. I give you Bishop John Harvey Taylor, the Bishop of Los Angeles.
Thank you, Troy, for those eloquent opening remarks and for your extraordinary service for so many years to the cause of justice and practical equity for those who are victims of our broken immigration and asylee system. I sit here with four experts in this matter. The person who is speaking now is not the expert, but I do have this place of moderation, which is my work this afternoon, and I'm going to seize, I hope, no more than 3 minutes, maybe 5, and talk about 3 areas of absolutely annoying and unnecessary failure. These are all things which could be fixed if we had the will to fix them, but we choose not to. The first is the failure of our politics. It's not that we could make our immigration and asylee system perfect, but we could get a half dozen experts of the caliber of those on the stage today, put them in a conference room with a coffee pot and give them a long weekend. They could have a difference of perspective on the issue, but they could find a way to come up with a system that was humane and practical and decent and reflective of the economy of immigration and the economy of the places in our country where immigrant workers are a vital part of the system. It could be done, but we choose not to because one political party doesn't want to give the other political party the advantage of having contributed to a solution of the problem. And that first political party also wants to be able to continue to use asylees and immigrant workers as convenient political scapegoats. The second failure is a failure of the American vision. We're part of a two-continent economy. Not only the economy of goods and services, but also the economy of labor. And in this continental economy, there are nations where the United States, in the Cold War era and after, either as a result of ideological or political interference or simply neglect, has been part of creating the problem that asylees are fleeing, which is economic and political instability, particularly in Central American nations. The United States has played a role in the history of these nations. We have some accountability to do, and policymakers could, if they wanted to, find a way to look at our continent as a single cultural economic unit. We could if we wanted to, but we don't. And the third failure is one that is close to all of our hearts, and that's the failure of Christian formation. I care less about what a sibling's view about immigration policy is, but than I do about how they treat those who are victims of the system we have. And if in order to be able to justify taking a harsh view on immigrant worker rights and asylee rights, it's necessary to objectify, demonize someone who was made in the image of Christ. That's a failure of Christian formation. Christians can't do that to people who were made in the image of God. We need to know the stories of those who were victims of our immigration and asylee system. Whether we necessarily want to fix it in the same way or not, we need to know their stories. We need to engage with them as children of a divine creator who wants us to treat one another with love and basic human dignity. So these are our three failures. They're all easily fixed. And what's happening yesterday and today at Church of the Epiphany is that we're taking back the 6th of January from the forces of toxic white nationalism that fueled the desecration of the United States Capitol on the 6th of January, 2021. We're taking back Epiphany, and perhaps thanks to the wisdom and insight of our panelists and the questioners who will be part of this process as well, we're also going to address these practical failures of a system that's waiting to be fixed if we just find the political will to do it. So the arrangement that we've made, my fellow panelists and I promise you, you will henceforward hear relatively little from me, is we have a series of questions which the panelists have gotten in advance, so they know what they're going to be asked about. And in each case, we're going to begin with Sarah, and we're going to move from Sarah down the panel toward me. And we're going to ask each panelist first to introduce themselves and describe their work, and then answer this fundamental question: what does immigration justice look like in your context? So down to Sarah. Pass it down. And I've also been reminded by Guillermo that I must cosas in the agenda. So welcome brief remarks, Troy Watson. Okay, we did that. Okay, opening prayer. So the Reverend John Watson. Sorry about that, Father.
That's fine. Today we raise a holy fist in solidarity with all those that have suffered and are suffering in the hands of the systems and sentiments and policies of people who see immigration as a threat rather than as a gift. Almighty and merciful God, whose Son became a refugee and had no place to call his own, look on mercy on those who flee from danger today, homeless and hungry. Bless those who work to bring relief, inspire generosity and compassion in all our hearts, and guide the nations of the world towards that day when all will rejoice in your kingdom of justice and peace, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
And my colleagues, that was the Reverend John Watson, priest in charge here at Church of the Epiphany. And we also are privileged to have with us, representing Supervisor Solis, who was so much a part of these issues throughout her vocation, her political career. We're going to have the pleasure of some remarks from Daniella Urbina. Let's make her feel welcome, please. Representing Hilda Solis. Sorry about that, Daniella.
No worries at all. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniella Urbina, and I support Supervisor Solis when it comes to immigration policy. And on behalf of Supervisor Solis, we just want to say thank you to everyone that's here to listen to the panel, but also to the panelists and for everyone who helped to organize this event. I think it's no secret to anyone that immigration is very much top of mind right now across the country, but very much so in LA County. And it's something that the supervisor, as the daughter of immigrants, has always been a champion for, always looking for ways to support our immigrant brothers and sisters to make sure that they have a home and that they feel welcome and have the resources that they need to thrive in LA County. The theme of this panel is having a welcoming place in LA County to make sure that immigrants feel welcome and are able to thrive here in their new homes. And that's something that Supervisor Solis has always championed and has always has been striving to make LA County exactly that. And it's why she helped to create the Office of Immigrant Affairs within Los Angeles County, which now has programs at an investment of over $14 million, with 12 million of those contracts going out to, or 12 million of those funds going directly to contracts for organizations that serve immigrants. And that includes a groundbreaking program called Represent LA, which is a $14 million program in and of itself that the county supports to provide removal defense for persons in immigration detention, removal defense for non-detained immigrants in removal proceedings, affirmative immigration relief representation, and community support for clients and families during their immigration process. We've also provided grant funding to immigrant serving organizations in the amount of close to $5 million. And we're also recently provided the Office of Immigrant Affairs additional resources to support migrants who we are finding more and more are finding their way into our homeless shelter system. And we know that as Texas continues to send buses, the county and the city of Los Angeles together, along with several nonprofit partners, some that are here today, that have helped us, are going to continue welcoming those buses and finding a way to ensure that those folks coming on those buses, or just showing up at Union Station on a Greyhound bus or coming to LAX, wherever that might be, are connected to the resources they need, even if it just means that they're trying to connect to their family sponsors that are already here. And I think we all know that back in 2021, the supervisor helped to open up a intake center at the Pomona Fairplex to support the undocumented minors that were actually coming through. And I want to say over 8,000 children, 8,000 children were reconnected to their loved ones and sponsors through that process here in the Pomona Fairplex. So I want everyone to know that you have a champion in Supervisor Hilda Solis, and we look forward to working with all of you to continue to make LA County a place where immigrants can call a new home. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniella. We all know Guillermo as a giant of justice. He's also a giant of agenda reform. Thank you for getting us back on track. We also, I think you're entitled to know who our speakers are before they introduce themselves, to give you a little bit of a running start. Sarah Kahn is Interim Director of the Center for Human Rights and Constitutional Law. This is in the order in which you see them left to right. Daniel C. is Asylum Coordinator and co-founder of Cameroon Advocacy. Josh Lopez-Reyes is Executive Director of the Echo Park Immigration Center. And Guillermo Torres is Immigration Program Director of our friends Clergy Laity United for Economic Justice, aka CLUE. We now have done all the preliminaries as they should have been, and as promised, Sarah Kahn.
Hi, I'm still Sarah. I use she, her pronouns, and I work for the Center for Human Rights and Constitutional Law. We primarily focus on impact litigation related to immigration issues, trying to change policy. Impact litigation is inherently sort of reactive, so we see things that the government is doing that we consider unjust, and then we react with litigation, and that is a very tiny part of movement work. It can be a useful tool, but it requires direct services, and it requires organizers who are doing the work, and it requires leadership of people who are directly impacted by the subject of each case. It requires the leadership of plaintiffs and class members. So in my work, I would say we do a lot of cases. We sue USCIS, we sue CBP, we sue all of DHS. We just sue any immigration-related agency in the federal government. We recently got a ruling that a regulation that delays the adjudication of special immigrant juvenile petitions was unlawful, and that they needed to be adjudicated more quickly. We also have a case that monitors or controls conditions in all DHS facilities that house children. So that was ICE and is now the Office of Refugee and Resettlement and Border Patrol stations. So we go and interview kids and ask them what's happening, and then try to enforce their rights to the best of our abilities. And the question of immigration justice, it's an interesting question. It's a hard question, actually. I think, of course, we probably would all agree that, humanitarian immigration relief needs to be protected, that discrimination against immigrants needs to end, that pathways to citizenship need to exist. And I think also it's hard to conceive of immigrant justice because the premise of immigration is unjust. The fact that somebody is born on one side of a border and then criminalized for crossing that border, especially when we know that our country manufactures diaspora and then shuts its door to the people of the diaspora that it has manufactured. So it's hard for me to imagine what justice and immigration together would mean. But I think that given the imperfect world that we're in, I guess striving towards community health and solidarity and movement work in community with folks. And I will pass it to the amazing Daniel.
Wow, thank you so much, Sarah. It's hard to follow after that. But hi, everybody. My name is Daniel Tay. I'm originally from Cameroon, an asylee from Cameroon. And I'm very happy and humbled to be here. Blessed to be in the house of the Lord above all. Each time I have to sit up in a panel like this and talk about an issue like this, I always find myself shaking as if it's the first time because of how connected I am to the situation. So, as I introduce myself, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the work I do and, what, immigration justice means to me. I came here as an asylee late 2019, down here in San Diego, seeking asylum from Cameroon. I was detained in over 5 detention centers here across California. I can name them all, from Otay Mesa to TLC to over here in LA, down to James A. Music, and I represented myself pro se, and I count myself blessed to be among the less than 1% of people who actually go before the immigration court pro se and win the asylum cases. And after I was released, I saw the importance of justice towards people who are detained, like myself, who didn't have access to information, who were being treated with double standards, who were being treated in an undignified manner, right? And it pained me so much as to why it's that way, right? And after I got released and established myself, of course, it was hard. I was homeless for a couple of weeks, even with an asylum in my pocket, right? The system still doesn't work for you. Or the system doesn't work, even with your asylum, it still doesn't work. So it was a hard and a challenging start, but getting grounded in the work and understanding that I need to strive for justice, I started working at the Haitian Bridge Alliance, which is a national organization based in San Diego, where we work, to support Black immigrants across the country and other migrants as well. We see at the Haitian Bridge Alliance that we went to the border for the Haitians, but we stayed for everyone else. So we do work, cut across direct representation, litigation, humanitarian support, and I correlate the actions of the Black Immigrants Bail Fund, which is the first bond fund that was created for Black migrants, which I'm going to be talking more about later because of the double standards, right, that Black migrants face in detention. And that is where it comes to what is immigration justice looks like for some people and in comparison to others. While I was detained here in TLAC, I was being given a bond of $17,500, and my bunkmate in the same cell was given a bond of $8,500. So I asked myself the question: what documents did he show in court to show that he's not a flight risk, as compared to me? Why was my bond $17,000 and his was $1,500? That's the double standards we're talking about, because of that stereotype nature, how Black migrants are being criminalized and being treated with a high level of scrutiny. It becomes an issue about what is immigration justice. And so that's why I do the work I do today. So the work I do cuts across direct representation, rapid response towards people who are detained and those who are released. I continue with what we call the post-release assistance program. I do work nationally, where I visit all the detention centers that I can across the country every now and then, because that's where people actually need the help, and that's what's being waved around, because people are being locked up in cages and have nowhere to go. So immigration justice for me, in simple words, as I always say, is that humanity shouldn't be validated for some people and not be validated for others. We all should be treated with dignity. Here we are seated here today in the house of the Lord. There are some people who are being locked up in cages, being locked up in segregation, and are unable to enjoy this justice, this freedom that we are experiencing today. And it bothers me that, the political mindset of it is so evil that people don't realize that this is back to humanity, right? And of course, with all the conversations happening today in DC around budget, it's so interesting how we are willing to trade humanity for war. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. I'm Josh. I use he, él pronouns, and such an honor to be here with these wonderful colleagues, but really to be here in this historical space. To echo Daniel, this is the house of the Lord, but this is a space, as many of you know, that has so much history in the city of welcoming our community members, regardless of where we were born or where our citizenship is. And that I say that as we talk about the work that we're doing at EPIC, the Echo Park Immigration Center. We're a new organization, and really have been influenced by the many people, including this person to my left here, Guillermo, and many others in the community here, of doing this work for many years. And so we were started through the Echo Park United Methodist Church, building upon the decades of being a refuge in a community safe space for immigrants, for our community members in Los Angeles, but not just working with the United Methodist Church as we are very much influenced by the interfaith and the ecumenical efforts that are happening in our community. And so such an honor to be here and speak a little bit to this question about what does immigration justice look like for us as a child of immigrants, personally seeing, to echo what my colleagues have said a little bit, how unjust our immigration system is. I've seen my father detained in a detention center. I've seen family members deported. And really, I think what it comes down to, what we're doing is trying to address the xenophobia, the dehumanization that this unjust system has created. Again, to echo what's already been said, we have literally created the problem and criminalized it and are benefiting from it, right? Our economy relies on unjust immigration practices, and really that is the work we're trying to do, is retell the story, that our community is not just victims, but we are powerful people, and we're trying to create resources, specifically focusing on youth, knowing that when we started our group work in 2021, we really started by listening to the community, and the parents, the elders wanted their children to have better opportunities. That's one of the main reasons why people make that sacrifice of going through all the harm to come here. And so really that's been our focus these last 2 years, of creating opportunities and empowerment and mentoring for our immigrant youth and their families. But we have a new project that, thanks to the help of many in here, we're starting to actually be a part of the group that is receiving those folks that are coming on buses, again, being treated inhumanely as scapegoats oftentimes. And we're opening up a space at our church in Echo Park, and we are going to be housing people temporarily. So as we continue to grow our community impact, we're continuing to increase the groups that we're working with. And again, it's such an honor to be among such an esteemed group of colleagues. And I'll pass it now to Guillermo.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Josh. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the honor to be here. My name is Guillermo Torres, and I run the immigration program at Clergy Laity United for Economic Justice. That work, those programs include the support for unaccompanied minors going back to 2014, when we brought together, not just me, but the real giants of justice like Father Richard Estrada, Pastor David Farley out here in the audience, where we created UCARE, the UCARE coalition of 50 orgs that we brought together to support the unaccompanied minors back then in 2014. In addition to the program for the unaccompanied minors, and we also have been organizing faith communities, educating, organizing, and mobilizing faith communities to support arriving asylum seekers who are fleeing horrific inhumanity, horrific violence, extreme poverty, natural disasters. That included some of the reasons also why the unaccompanied minors who are facing so much violence in the Northern Triangle region of Central America. But in the other programs that we have really been involved, it's the shutting down of the Adelanto Detention Center. We have been one of the key contributors and coordinators of the Shut Down Adelanto Coalition. We have initiated 4 civil rights lawsuits that have had major impact in Adelanto, including the possibility, the announcement, the recent news that the government is finally considering shutting down Adelanto, and they're in a review process. We just helped initiate the last lawsuit with accompany the migrants, because they're the ones that lead us, and they're the ones that lead the voices for change. So they lead us as far as this call for justice of all the inhumanity and the horrific history that Adelanto has had, including the deaths of many migrants, and then the spraying of chemicals during the pandemic for 6 months with no regard for the pain and the migrants' expressions of what they were going, having breathing problems, breathing from their noses, irritated eyes. Some of them the elderly were taken to the emergency all that, we have helped initiate a new lawsuit that was initiated last March, and the judge has ruled that it could move forward, and including the Fair Hearts lawsuit that with that lawsuit back in 2020, we were able to get 250 people released from an order by a judge, and who chastised GEO and ICE for that horrific situation back then in that horrific detention center. So those are some of the programs that our main mission is to organize, educate, organize, and mobilize clergy to support migrants and support all migrants. And as Bishop mentioned earlier, to combat the indifference to the humanity of another human being, which has been said many times, I think, by many of my brothers and sisters here. What does immigration justice look like? Just a little while ago, I talked to Pastor Frank, who was welcoming one of the buses that just arrived from Texas about 2 days ago on Thursday. And similar to the first bus that arrived when we were there at the Welcome Center, Father Richard was there when the first bus arrived in Ramon. The migrants were sent from Texas without food. We know the indifference to the humanity by the governor of Texas, right? We counteract that inhumanity by affirming the humanity and dignity of every human being. The bus that arrived Thursday, not only were they not fed and not given any food again, but they also placed a Texas Ranger for the first time inside the bus with them, who verbally abused them, who verbally talked down to them and dehumanized them. So justice to us is counteract that inhumanity, those kind of treatment, making sure that migrants, when they arrive here, feel affirmed in their dignity and humanity, and feel that they have a support in a safe space. And that's just one case of immigrant justice for us. But like my sister said, that it's immigrant justice is serious. So I mean, immigration reform hasn't happened for how long? The inhumanity that this government hasn't affirmed the humanity of so many Americans that have already been here. That's just incomprehensible and inhumane. So that's what immigrant justice looks to me.
So this is the original fast talker saying to my fellow panelists that we've been asked by Gabe to, if we can slow down a little bit for the sake of our simultaneous translation that's going on for those who are following us via Zoom. So back to the issue, which is, I think, going to be a common one and a repeated one this afternoon, about political failure, as the Biden administration continues to tack to the right in anticipation of a close election. The United States appears to be on the verge of ending asylum at the border once again. From your unique perspective, what would this change mean as a practical matter for the communities you serve? Once again, Sarah.
Thank you. Well, I suppose this isn't practical, but it's just, I mean, it's just so devastating, and it feels like every time there is an inch of progress, there's a mile of pain. And I mean, incorporating HR 2 into this budget deal is going to be, I mean, it's like the worst thing that could happen since the first Exclusion Act. It's really horrific. It basically ends asylum. You can't get asylum if you pass through another country, if you don't apply at a port of entry, if you don't use the CBP One app, if you have anything in your history that they can point to. I mean, there's so many bars that essentially it doesn't exist anymore. There's going to be family detention is going to come back, the detention of unaccompanied children, the detention centers across the border, ICE detention centers will be overflowing with humans who are trying to move. The conditions are going to be, if possible, even worse than what they already are. And there's no reason there's really no reason. I mean, it's been said, but there should be a pathway to citizenship for everyone who's here. I don't know what the practical answer is. Just, it's going to be so devastating that it's hard to even articulate.
Thank you so much. As I mentioned earlier during my opening remarks, it's so sad to see that we are at the verge of trading humanity for war. And, we've been doing a lot of meetings with various offices, even locally, around this issue on the budget negotiations. And when you listen to some of the remarks or the responses that some of these offices give, I ask myself, where it's like there's no iota of humanity left or even understanding of the situation left. I ask myself, where has our compassion gone to? Where is our understanding of what a perfect war should be like? Where has our understanding of, America gone to? Because of the ideas, the counter narratives that folks have around providing safety for people. And as I mentioned earlier, this is something that's very close to home because this could have been me, right? I say this and I think about more than a dozen of Cameroonians who died last year on high sea, risking their lives to seek safety. Our brothers and sisters who've died in detention, as Guillermo mentioned, last week or last month, a Cameroonian guy died in Pennsylvania in the detention center because of the evil carceral system that we have, which is being, negotiated right now. Thinking about our brother Nebane who died down there in San Diego at Otay Mesa. All of these lives could have been protected if, our system, wasn't combated as such. It's developed from one thing to another. And I start making analysis from when I first got here. When I got here, there was a metering system where I arrived at the border. I had to write my name down and wait for a couple of weeks, I think almost 2 months before I could cross the border legally, because of course that's what people keep saying. People come here illegally, and that's a term. And when I ask people what do they mean by legally or illegally, and they're unable to explain that. But that simply means presenting yourself at the port of entry, right? And which that's what people are doing. But we find out that the work that we are doing at the border, Haitian Bridge Alliance, we find all sorts of things happening with people being convinced to go through the other routes that are not legal, and it's just another drama of its own. But what I'm trying to say here is, we've seen how things have evolved since before COVID, where there was the Title 42, there was the asylum ban, there was the mass deportations. It's always one thing to another, all geared towards pushing people away. And I start making an analysis from when I first got here. But let's go back down into history, with the Haitian-Cuban crisis, when the Haitians and the Cubans got here, and we saw what was the response for that. So the system, like Guillermo said, has been designed in such a way that we don't even want to think about providing safety. We want to think about how do we create a system where it's being criminalized, or people are being criminalized and pushed back to these burning houses where they are coming from. So again, going back to the issue around what's happening right now, it's sad because again, we are willing to trade away our humanity to fund war, to fund weapons, to do other things that will not put our world to a better position.
Thank you. So, full disclosure, I was born here in California, but my ancestors come from this place we call Mexico, right? And so at one point, the ancestors didn't have these borders that is the U.S.-Mexico border, right? One of the most militarized. Even in my lifetime, after 9/11, we saw the militarization of this imaginary line, right? It is obviously a line, but I have family that lives across it too. And so just seeing how this place, it literally, it's very different from the other border that this country has up to the north, right? It is very much so intentional. And so I appreciate Daniel bringing up history and my other colleagues bringing up history, because I think it is so important to understand as we're dealing with these issues today. They're not new in many ways, but also, again, full disclosure, we're all immigrants, right? Unless we're actually indigenous to these lands in which we, here in the Tongva Gavrolino territory that we're at, and that's, I think, as it comes to addressing this issue, it really is a matter of education and really understanding, who benefits from these laws, who benefits. Obviously, we know that this border crisis has been years in the making, and we know who's benefiting from it. And so I think it is a matter of really understanding our history, lest we repeat it and continue to dehumanize and continue to criminalize people for the sake of our economy, for the sake of having tomatoes all year round, for the sake of having the products that come to our tables, and just the things that we consume on a day-to-day basis, right? And so I'm not saying there's an easy fix. I echo my colleagues that it is heartbreaking, but I think there are things that we can do, right? And one thing that we're trying to really do, a mentor once told me, when it comes to community work, there's different ways of approaching it. There's, you can give a person a fish, or you can teach them how to fish, right? And really, our focus has been on those two things, addressing the essential day-to-day needs, but also the empowerment piece. But then the third part that my mentor said is that it comes to a matter to really asking the question, why are some people with fish and why are others not? Why are people hungry? Who owns the rights to the pond? Why? And in this case, relating it to the border, if we really, as people of faith and consciousness, believe that this is God's creation, then why are we building these borders that allow some in and others without, others hungry? And who's benefiting from it, right? So I really think it's a matter of empowering our communities to also know that these are human-made laws and they can be changed. And so pass it on to Guillermo with that.
Thank you, Josh. So two things. When the Biden administration came into power, I was a little bit of hopeful because of the extreme that we had just left. But with politicians, you never know, because they're sometimes better at what they say than what they do. Now, let's not laugh so much at the politicians, because some religious leaders are like that too. But Hilda, with one of those exceptions, has been Hilda Solis. So thank you for being here, sister. She's really been a true giant for migrants ever since I've been around working around migrants. So, but the Biden administration has had some major missteps on immigration. First, with the unaccompanied minors, they started, when they first arrived, they started putting them in detention centers in Texas, where Trump used to have them. That was one of their first misstep. Second, they abandoned the way the Biden administration abandoned Afghanistan, and that inhumanity of that. And I don't want to. We do have a brother here. I hope he doesn't get offended me by saying, but Johar is actually an asylum seeker. That him and his family came from Afghanistan, asylum seekers, and I'm so happy that he's here today, and our congregations have been supporting him. But how we abandoned them, and the indifference to their humanity, the way that we abandoned them. Third, we saw the Haitians at the border when and this was under the Biden administration, when the Border Patrol was stamping them with their horses, throwing their horses at them, after suffering such a horrific earthquake and political violence. And then the Cubans and the Venezuelans, suddenly they were letting them in, suddenly we're going to send them out back. So what would happen if this asylum, it's like we never learn. Like, why don't you go, Biden administration, how can you be so disconnected? How can you're about to negotiate the people who are fleeing horrific violence to give money for war, to continue war? How can you do that? Have we not learned the lesson? Speak to our Jewish community members. What it was like seeing their family members, hear the stories of their family members when we close our backs to them, close our eyes to them, turn our backs on them, when they were fleeing the Holocaust, when they were fleeing Germany to seek refuge, and we close the door and we send them back to their deaths. That's what's going to happen to these asylum seekers. I mean, we just got a guy released from Adelanto from Mexico to come and seek asylum. I just visited him last week. He's staying at one of our churches. His father was killed in Mexico. That's what this is going to do. This new asylum restrictions again is to deny refuge to a human being that is seeking to escape from violence and death, right? And to deny them that right to seek asylum, that's who's going to be really affected. Those people's lives will be put in danger to be either sent back to their countries to be put back in that zone of danger of violence. Mexico, it's very dangerous there, the cartels, and then even the other trips, the journeys to the Panama, all those journeys that they make, all of that. If we close the loop again on asylum, which we did, and there's a case right now to bring back the rights of asylum seekers, that's what's going to happen. It's mainly those asylum seekers could face the horrific possibility of being killed or being hurt because of the indifference again that this administration, again, politicians, again, like Bishop you mentioned, the indifference they have to the humanity of others.
Thank you, Guillermo. So, first of all, I'm grateful to my colleague Troy Elder at IRIS for these 4 questions. The first 2 of which are about the status quo, the situation in which you as practitioners and justice seekers find yourself and the constituencies you serve. The next 2 questions are about possibilities. The first one secular, and the last question will be about the community of faith, faith leaders. But what we're getting at here is structural barriers to justice. And here's the way I'd like to put it. Imagine yourselves now as immigration policy wonk, and some hypothetical, well-meaning politician has said, fix one thing today. What would be the thing that you would fix? We'll start again with Sarah.
Thanks. I'm not sure if this is one thing, but I guess sort of 2 sides of one coin. One side is creating a pathway to citizenship, and the other side is not criminalizing migration and understanding migration as a human right. And Guillermo, you were talking, and I think really the linchpin of that is racism. Racism allows one group to other another group, and then because of that to criminalize that group just for existing and trying to survive and trying to thrive, and then justify treatment of that group based on that racism circularly. And you, Guillermo, mentioned Holocaust survivors. My grandparents on my father's side are Holocaust survivors, and they immigrated as refugees. And when they came, they were perceived as Jewish. They were perceived as immigrants and othered and Jewish. And by the time that they were old, they were perceived as white. They had been welcomed into whiteness because that's just the way history happened to happen. And they did thrive. I was given a very beautiful life and my grandparents got a very beautiful end of their life. And part of that was because of the privilege that was afforded to them when they began to be seen as white. And they began to be seen as human with value. And that's what we deny to people when we treat something like asylum as a law, and there needs to be these different elements and standards, and we don't think about the fact that this is a family or a kid or a human being coming to try to survive. So, structural barrier, I think a lot of people who are anti-immigration, they'll say, well, why didn't somebody just come legally? And it's like, for billions of people, there is no legal, quote-unquote, way to immigrate. There isn't a way. I mean, people aren't walking for hundreds of miles. They aren't enduring, abuse and detention and living without documentation by choice. It's because there isn't an opportunity to immigrate if that's what somebody chooses to do. So I guess ending criminalization and providing a pathway to citizenship. Obviously, humanitarian is the most urgent and first, but for everybody.
Thank you so much. I'm going to echo a lot of things that you said, Sarah. But first of all, grounding ourselves in that the most significant or one thing that could be fixed structurally is, first of all, and that's what the foundation of my work is around, understanding the idea going back to humanity. Again, I'm going to say my famous quote I always say everywhere I speak: humanity cannot be validated for some people and not be validated for others. This is because I've seen it personally, and I've seen it with the communities that I work with every day. And so, three things. Firstly, the double standards we have in our system, that mindset, of treating people differently needs to change, right? As Guillermo mentioned, about over 2 years ago, down at the border, we have majority Haitians and other black migrants coming to seek safety, coming to seek asylum. This young man went back to Mexico to buy food for his family. Upon return, he's being faced with violence and being whooped, and pushed back in such a terrible manner that reminds us of the horrible time of slavery, right? But at the same time, when all of that atrocities happening, there was the camp in Del Rio. It was a whole news. It was a whole thing, right? But nobody actually knows what happens to those people that were there, because we were on the ground. 98% of the people who were in that encampment were all deported back to danger, right? But at that same time, we had a situation where, again, this is not to create any controversy, but our Afghan and other Ukrainian brothers and sisters that were seeking safety, right, were being offered a red carpet where they came in and, being offered these opportunities that others were being denied for. I'm just saying here in such conclusion that we should go back to that aspect of humanity where we fix this structural problem, in addition to what Sarah said, right, of making everything equal for everybody. Secondly, going back to the issue of criminalizing immigrants. When I first arrived at the border 2019, I was doing the legal way, right? I presented myself at the port of entry. I'm here to seek asylum. What happens? Somebody just pops out of nowhere, face the wall, push me to the ground, tackles me down, put me on handcuffs, my hand, my waist, my legs. They lock you up in this seal-up, bus, drive you from San Diego to LA in a bus, no food, no water, and you're in chains. They lock you in this social confinement. All of these treatments, is that really necessary? Right? The idea is to broke you, to criminalize you, to make you understand that you have no value, you're not human, you're not welcome here. We don't want to see you, you're disgusting, go away. That's the idea, and that's how the system has been designed. And that's what I felt at that moment, right? And that's why I'm not going to stop doing this thing till we see a change, because we should go back to humanity and stop criminalizing. And again, because of black migrants, this punishment or the sufferings that we face is twice as much, right, as compared to other folks. So the idea of criminalizing immigrants and the idea of also returning back to the aspect of humanity, treating everybody with dignity and respect.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel and Sarah, for sharing your personal and family stories. And I would, just echo also in terms of addressing the structures that are really dehumanizing our community members. I was talking about borders earlier, but I think really the biggest border that this might sound hippy-dippy, but I think the biggest border is from this year to this year, the borders that exist in our minds, the borders that exist in our hearts. And to echo what Bishop Taylor said earlier about Christian discipleship, I think there are so many opportunities for our faith communities, for even from just a humanitarian perspective, to really see each other differently. And so that's the work we're trying to do. The remedy to it is we use the word belonging, that we all belong, and we're trying to create a sense of belonging in our community, regardless of what our birth certificates say, where we were born. We all belong in the city. We all belong in our communities. And really, that's tough work, It really, again, I appreciate you sharing your stories. It really does take us seeing each other differently, seeing ourselves differently, even so. And our children, right? The way that we train them and teach them, it really is a matter that it's taken a long time to get to where we're at, and I don't think there's a quick fix to it. But I really do think that at the heart of the political crisis we're in, it really is a matter of us being able to see each other, the humanity, the shared humanity, and the shared suffering. That at the end of the day, we're all in this world together, and what addresses what is affecting people, experiencing the ones that are suffering most in this immigration crisis. It really does have an impact on all of us. And so I think it's, moving from a spirit of competition, which we know our political system works that way. Literally, it is one against the other, right? Moving from that to a spirit of collaboration. And again, that's easier said than done. So I'll pass it to you so you can give us all the answers. Just kidding.
No, not all the answers. A few, but since I've been working at Clergy Laity for Economic Justice, I always get reminded of one of our main values. When we're trying to change systems, walk in solidarity with migrants, workers, it's not just about winning power. It's not just about winning a seat on the table, which is also needed and valuable. It's not just about putting somebody, taking somebody out of office and putting somebody else to represent our community, right? Which is many of the laws and policies towards immigrations are done by people who have never been affected or people who have no connection to migrants, including after the 9/11, the people who made those policies and brought down such extreme immigration policies after that. But it's about changing hearts, not just taking somebody out of power. Because then, if I take that person out of power, but he still believes he's still indifferent to the humanity is still indifferent to the humanity of another human being, then that person still has that racism in them, that lack of justice, lack of compassion, lack of empathy, and more than anything, lack of love. And the absence of love is the absence of justice, and it's the presence of oppression and evil and racism. Right, so it's about changing those people those people who are in power, changing their conscience, changing their hearts to see the humanity of another human being, not seeing them as our enemy, even though they're the oppressor. But how do we change their hearts? Right? How do we bring conscience to them? Right? Like Reverend James Lawson taught us, nonviolence. Right? But as far as structures, the structures of these private for-profit prisons, the inhumanity of those prisons, that no human being should be subject to such inhumanity. Those policies, the current time that we have right now to address the Biden administration from doing a big mistake and closing and shutting down and making it more difficult for asylum seekers, addressing that at this moment. And so those are just some of the structures that I think that need to be removed, and putting in place those communities of colors that are affected directly, who can address, who really know what justice is and who know the humanity of another person, listening to those voices in those spaces that those voices are not there.
Thank you, Guillermo. We're about to have our last question and round of responses, and so now's the time for those of you who have a question of your own for one of our panelists to begin to queue it up. We'll have about 10 minutes or so, or 15 minutes after this last round of answers for your questions, so we look forward to hearing them. The answers we've gotten already have anticipated our last questions, which has to do with the work of faith leaders and faith communities. If I'm not mistaken, Dr. King's last speech on the night of April 3rd in Memphis was to a group of ministers whom he asked to do a little bit more to get out of their churches and out of their naves and out from behind their pulpits and to actually do the work for which he was putting his life on the line. I know that some of you, at least, are not reluctant to call the church and ask for what you need, because every once in a while my phone phone rings, and there is Guillermo, and it is always a blessing. But the final question is, how can people of faith and others of conscience, and that basically defines this group here this afternoon, what more do you need from us?
I guess, raise awareness. I think that sounds silly, but it's important to talk about these issues because you don't know what the people, if you're a faith leader, what the people in your congregation need to hear or have heard or are thinking or feeling. Raise the voices of your congregation and your community. And, if the issue is immigration, then both your community and your congregation has the person most qualified to speak, which is a person who has immigrated, and raise money. People need money.
Thank you, Sarah. First of all, I want to begin by thanking the faith community in general. Like you said, every now and then Guillermo picks up your phone and call. I have numbers of various faith leaders across the nation that I could call on speed dial for them to receive somebody for a night, for them to stay before we take them to their sponsor or provide a care package or whatever, or even prayers. So somebody who is in detention who needs encouragement, and the church has always been there. I call myself a fruit of the system because I've been through a lot of things that I could apply in every question of my life, because I found refuge in the church, right? I remember very well when I arrived in Playas Tijuana, early November of 2019, sleeping under the bridge there. I didn't have a place to go. It reminded me, there is refuge in the house of the Lord. And there am I walking down to Calvary Chapel, Playas Tijuana, where I started playing the keyboard for them at the church, right? Stayed there for, my time when I was away in Mexico. So there is so much great work that the house of the Lord, the faith community, has done to help. And I want to first of all begin by thanking and acknowledging that great work. We've worked a lot with various faith communities where they're hosting people and providing us awareness, providing a space like this for us to talk. And so to answer your question directly, this is what we should be doing and more, right? By providing this space for us to be able to express, raise awareness. The church has been very, very supportive financially, but like Sarah said, we need more money to provide for people, right? And COVID came and turned a little bit things around, but we need the congregation to actually step up. The church as a body is with us, but we need even the congregation to come back to that aspect of humanity. I believe so much in the direct assistance rather than the global policy change. That one person that you help, you talk to, either by praying for them or by sending them a card or by hosting them at your house or by providing them a shelter, that is where the work is, and that's what we need.
Thank you. To add to what my colleagues have said, I'm just reminded about how we began this gathering today. And I think even just the gathering itself is what comes to mind to bring our people together, to bring our resources together, to capitalize, to use that word, on these days, the Epiphany. There's so much, but I'm reminded of Father John's prayer of in the Christian tradition, the Creator becoming a refugee. Like, there's so much rich theological treasures that our traditions have that I think we can go into and, to really be, again, to echo what Troy said too, this pastoral, group of accompaniment, to build and to learn from the traditions that have done it. There have been many, outside of the U.S., many communities who have done very much Christian-based communities and other, communities that are, just sharing their resources and their goods. But again, just want to one last time say, this place is such a historical space that has done that, this little church here. So I think those who are part of communities, faith communities, opening up your space, to be a historical space like the one that we're in today, I think there's so much to do. So, whether it's like what we're doing in Echo Park of literally opening up our doors to receive, community members in refuge, or, bringing food, bringing, all the thank you to all the volunteers who are helping us out too and painting the place. And there's just so much. There's a list. But again, a great segue to my brother Guillermo, because it's, answering the phone when people like him call and ask for help. So I'll pass it to you.
Thanks, Josh. So even though there's sometimes darkness and a lot of pain, that we see, the inhumanity, there's also a lot of light, and there's also a lot of hope. And our faith communities have played many roles even before I was here. People have laid the groundwork from the civil rights movement to the sanctuary movement. So faith communities have a very important role. In the aspect that we're in right now, in our work right now, one of those roles is that we're about to convene the first meeting to discuss the work that we do with the LA Welcome Collective. That collective was created, was formed about a year before last year, put together in case buses were going to arrive to Texas. Daniel had been doing this even before this collective, Haitian Bridge Alliance, and he's part of this collective. But we have a role there as faith communities that we're playing there. There's a couple of orgs there, the Catholic Diocese, Churla, Carecen, Haitian Bridge Alliance, us, and IMDEF. And we all have our different roles that and you heard about one of those roles, where one of those is our clergy actually are the first ones to now get on the buses and give the instructions and the welcoming to make sure that the migrants feel more trust and have that warm reception from a religious leader. But we're going to convene. Some of our churches have been housing migrants already from the buses, but also from the border and from detention. Recently, we got released more than 125 Mauritanians in a campaign that me, Daniel, and others led from Adelanto. But specifically to the welcoming of the buses, the collective, we are putting. We have been doing work already since the beginning with the collective, but we're putting our first meeting together, and that's going to take place on February the 9th at one of the churches here in LA to bring faith communities together to talk to them about what the collective does, and if you want to support the migrants arriving via the buses via Texas, and support and what role you can play, whether it's as a religious leader, your congregation. So we're going to talk about that. That first meeting is going to take place on February the 9th, a Friday at 10 a.m. CT is our new organizer, a former immigrant, also formerly detained himself. He's our new organizer for Clergy Laity United for Economic Justice. He has sign-up sheets for that, and you could give him your information. But this is for those who want to know about the Welcome Collective and want to have a role as a faith community. We have about 6 or 7 churches. Josh mentioned Epic. The Echo Park Methodist Church is getting ready to become another shelter for migrants. We have other 2 churches more that are working. It's an interfaith gathering. And it's also a gathering for community also. If you're not connected to any faith community, you're welcome, but it's interfaiths. So that's the first meeting we're going to have together, even though we have been meeting with religious leaders on an individual basis that have been supporting the network and the collector for since the beginning. But this is the first time we're going to convene to have our regular meetings once a month, and how to build and continue to build a structure and the support network around the migrants that are coming via the Texas, the last bus coming about 2 days ago. So if you want to be part of that collective, or want to listen, at least learn about it and how you can have a role, please join us that day. And then, as Daniel mentioned, one of the things is open up your spaces as pastors, as ministers, to invite asylum seekers to share their stories, to listen to their stories, to listen to them, and to see what does solidarity mean to them versus what does solidarity mean to me. What I want versus what they want, what we think sometimes we know that the immigrant wants, but how about listening to those who are affected directly, asylum seeker, and say, what does solidarity mean to them? So inviting them to your spaces, to your churches, to speak and share their story, and to listen, what does solidarity actually mean to them? What does it mean to them? What does it look like? And what does justice that look like for them? So those are just a few of them. And also, if you want to be part of the Shut Down Adelanto campaign that we have, with the possibility that they're going to shut it down, please let us know. But the collective, the Welcome Collective, this is our first convening of this interfaith group and committee members. We're going to invite Daniel to come and share their role. We're going to invite Shirla, the case managers, how they're working with the churches. We're going to invite other folks, city officials and county, who are also partner in the they're not part of the collective, but they're partners in the collaboration to receive the migrants. Hilda Solis' office has been a big supporter, the Office of Immigrant Affairs for the county and the city of LA. So yeah, if you're interested in being part of that meeting, that convening is going to take place February the 9th, and it's our first gathering together to see how we connect with each other and how we continue to build the structure of support based on the faith communities for the arriving migrants versus the via Texas. So that's just some of the few things where you can get connected and pray. Yeah.
Thank you, Guillermo. Questions for our panelists, please. It's your turn. Please. There is a woman with her hand up and sunglasses, and now is your moment, and I'm going to see if I can bring the microphone to you so we can hear. It's going to be a little Señora, por favor.
Sí. Mi nombre es Blanca Angulo. Yo soy invidente, soy ciega. Yo llevo muchos años asistiendo personas que empiezan a perder la vista.
Her name is Blanca, and she's blind, and she's been able to assist many people who've been here in this community.
Y muchos de nosotros somos inmigrantes que estamos en proceso y otros que todavía no pueden arreglar por falta de lo económico.
Many people are immigrants, and I didn't catch that last bit. Maybe Grace, you can help me.
Many of the people are immigrants and don't have papers, and some are in process and are about to get their papers, but they're economically unable to pay for what they need.
Muchas de las personas nos han dicho cuando yo he ido a conferencias como esta que hay ayuda, que nos van a ayudar, pero cuando vamos no hay esa ayuda.
So many places where we go with organizations and even forums like this one, we go and then they say that they're going to help, but then when we seek the help, there is no help.
Inclusive yo estoy pasando por un alojamiento, me quieren sacar del apartamento porque no tengo papeles. Yo estoy con mi esposo que es ciudadano.
So inclusive, one of our big issues is that like my case, I live in an apartment and they want to evict me from that apartment, me and my husband, because we don't have papers.
Yo no tengo a dónde irme, inclusive aquí tengo un compañero también que se va a quedar sin vivienda.
And I don't have where to go. And even here, right here is one of my companions, one of my friends who is also about to be evicted as well and has no place.
Mi pregunta es, ¿con quién hay que dirigirse para que lo ayuden a uno? Porque yo siempre oigo que hay ayuda, hay millones, pero pues nunca nos toca a nosotros.
So my big question is, where do I go to get the help that we need? Because everywhere we go, we keep being told there's help, and there's millions, and yet we don't see any of that.
Por decir, ¿hay alguna ley que a mí me ampare, que no me puedan separar de mi esposo, o no la hay?
So is there a law that will shelter me, that will say I don't have to be separated from my husband, or is there not a law? Se lo vamos a dar para que conteste. Está bien.
Gracias, señora. Huh? Oh, you want me to? Sure. ¿En español prefieres, señora? Sí. Okay. En el condado de Los Ángeles tiene un programa que se llama Stay Housed LA y provee ayuda legal para gente que se encuentra bajo problemas de que los quieren sacar de la vivienda. Entonces, si usted me pasa su información, yo la puedo conectar con nuestro departamento de Consumer and Business Affairs, asuntos de Consumer and Business, y podemos ver cuál asistencia le podemos brindar. También tenemos una oficina de asuntos migratorios y tenemos un programa que se llama Represent LA, que también puede ayudar con asistencia legal para los que necesiten. Entonces, si me pasa su información, yo la puedo ayudar. Gracias. Sure. In English, the county does have 2 programs that may be able to help her. We have the Stay Housed LA program that is supporting tenants with some legal support, and in some cases there is some funding that can go to landlords if there is back rent, and we can get that information to her. And then we also have the Office of Immigrant Affairs, and through the Represent LA program, we do offer legal support for people who are in deportation hearings, and so that's another thing that I can connect her to see if we can support her.
Adriana, thank you for staying for the whole program so you can answer that question. Gracias por su pregunta, señora. Otras preguntas para los expertos y la experta.
Rosalio Munoz, and I've been active in the immigrant rights movement since August 29, 1970. And Bert Corona, I was walking to talk to a big demonstration, and Bert Corona introduced me and introduced them to a new group of the MAPA, Mexican American Political Association. Actually, it was Hermandad Nacional de Migración also that they were joining, and he did that to show me these are part of the constituency of the anti-war, civil rights, justice things, and since then, that's how I've looked at it. But the question is, well, they're related issues. One, how much do we look at the immigrant as an object rather than a subject and work with them on and arm in arm to win citizenship, to win human rights as a key thing, and then who benefits? I believe it's Wall Street. I believe it's the real estate interest and all of those. So it's not just a matter of democracy and it's class struggle also. And how can we work more to have one of the first times I met Peter Shea was on a May Day march. And Guillermo, on another May Day march. You know, one was 100 people, one was several 100,000 people. We need the several 100,000s and more.
Who'd like to go first with that large systemic question?
You mentioned Peter Shea.
There we go.
I cannot speak for Peter Shea. Oh gosh, I wasn't prepared. What was the?
Let me give it a bite at it.
Thank you.
Yeah, from what I picked up, I think I'm gonna answer a little bit of what I picked up from your question. About folks being the subject and rather than being an object of achieving be citizenship or whatever form of relief that we are fighting for. And I understand that in a lot of different ways. Personally, I have a very radical mindset about how we should do the work, just as Guillermo mentioned, making sure that those who are impacted be on the table when these conversations are happening. When I first started doing this work, I was a tool in such a way that I was an object rather than the subject, or the subject, I don't know, whatever we should put it. Right, I was being used, for lack of a better word, to understand better. I was just, I'm always being called, just come and tell us what happened. Tell your story, but when the decisions about what actually happens is being made, I'm not consulted, right? So I think a strategic way for that change to happen is making sure that those who are impacted, like Guillermo mentioned, should be on the table when these conversations are happening. It is true that, there's a whole economic part of it, about big companies and systems benefiting from when all of this is going to happen. But at the same time, we should look at what is going to happen to those people whose lives are at risk, right? So we shouldn't back down because of this bigger agenda, but we should remain focused on what is actually going to happen, the lives that are going to change, the lives that are going to be transformed, right? Rather than, like, for example, our dear sister over there, what she's going through right now, that's what we should be focusing on. And so my focus mainly is direct service, direct, that's where it matters, right? The direct help that you give to somebody is much more important than the systemic change that we're looking for.
I'll quickly say thank you so much for the question. And Peter Shea is the president of the organization I work for, and truly is a giant in the immigration world and has done incredible work. And I subscribe very much to what Daniel said. And I think that there was a long time in the world when the people who were given access to things like a JD and the courtroom were white and were male, and that isn't the case anymore. And that, that we need to do what Daniel is saying we need to do. We need to make sure that work happens under the leadership of the people who are the most involved in the work. And that means personally involved, not coming in from the outside to direct work. So I really just want to say I appreciate what Daniel said.
You guys good? Okay. Additional questions, please. I have a nice long cord. I can come all the way to you. Seeing none? Going once? Troy, please.
At risk of speaking again, first, just to the last point about working with and coming alongside, IRIS and many other organizations need volunteers to do things like go to the airport and pick up refugees when they arrive, deliver baskets of food, volunteer helping fill out green card applications. See me after if you want to, and many others here as well. But my question really is to the panel, and it's one of a lot of, I guess it comes from a place of sincerity. At the beginning, I hesitated about raising the Haitian earthquake as really implying that there was an analogy there between the deaths of some 250,000 people and what that caused for that country, and I almost didn't include it, in part because one of my Haitian colleagues was going to be here. I don't think he's here because it's kind of sensitive. But there are hundreds of thousands of people coming across the border. I've been doing this work for 30 years. And people of good faith and good conscience and who know what I do and who have been funders, for example, and supporters of this work have a little bit of a different attitude now. It seems that there is sort of a crisis, a magnitude of crisis that is different. I'm so glad there is no asterisk next to that part of Matthew 25 about welcoming the stranger, because it doesn't say welcome the stranger except when there's too many of them, right? So my question is, given that this is a crisis and that we're in this election year and we're not seeing a trickle, I don't think we can say that anymore, right? This is not a landslide. This is a huge amount of people at the border. How do we message everything we've been talking about here today in this context of a tectonic shift and crisis?
Thank you. Una más pregunta grande. Señores, señora.
Well, Troy, thank you, Troy, for that. And I don't know if we should be using the word crisis, because I think the other side might use that word to scare people. The folks who are anti-immigrant, when they say crisis, the border. But Troy, when you were talking and you mentioned Jesus and you mentioned how do we help so many people? so much pain, so much suffering. In fact, in my tradition, I don't even know how God can bear so much pain. How can I bear? And then those who are affected directly. And sometimes I wonder, how am I going to do it? How are we going to do it? When so many people, so many of our brothers, sisters, mothers, they're part of my humanity. I'm part of the humanity of this world. So much pain and so much suffering. So one time I came to that space where, God, how are we supposed to help so many people? And it was challenging me processing that thought. And then I came to, in my Christian tradition, or my tradition, where the multitudes came up to Jesus. And the disciples were there. And they told Jesus, what do we do with so much people? We can't feed them. Send them away. Right? Like, it's too many. It's 5,000. And it's only like 12 disciples or less. And I thought about that. And what did Jesus say? You feed them. You take care of them. In other words, I'm just saying that that I was in that space of doubt and that space of pain and that space of like, how do I do it? It's too much, right? And then I was reminded of that scripture. But I wouldn't use the word crisis either, because some of the migrants taught me that also. And this is being in this space. It's always learning, like Daniel said, from those who are affected directly, that the opposition also uses that word a lot to bring to demonize migrants, and that there's a crisis at the border and we got to get the border under control. So I would just keep doing what we do, where we shed the light into darkness, where we talk about the humanity and lifting the humanity of the person, and and keep educating folks, and keep changing hearts, and keep changing conscience, and keep changing the narrative. Because that's a big thing, a big part of this. Being public, raising your voices, walking with immigrants, being out there in the streets when they do a march, like my brother Rosalio mentioned those marches that we did in 2006, and they did them before I did, right? Being public, because you know what that means to migrants. Some of the actions we done with migrants, and some of us had that privilege to do civil disobedience. The migrants, when they saw us doing that, they started crying. They couldn't never believe that a religious leader would do civil disobedience on their behalf. But being quiet against those voices, just like what happened in the other evil that was unchecked, what it meant to communities when they're being attacked, when they're silenced and nobody else stands up with them, not for them, but with them, whether it's the Jewish community, anti-Semitism at this moment was happening, or the Muslim community is when the Muslim ban. What does it mean to that community when nobody stands up with them? And what happened in the past? That's why we always got to continue to shed our light, our love, and our voices of humanity in light of those who share, who have the other narrative of dehumanizing another human being.
Daniel, please.
Thank you so much. Bishop Taylor already answered your question directly during his opening remarks. It's not that we don't have the capacity. It's not that we don't have the resources. It's not that we don't have the means to do so. I think the will is even there, right? But I don't know, one of you guys mentioned there is a border wall that has been created. The border is more in the mind than in the than down there in San Diego, right? It's that we lack the will to do it rather than the ability. So I was trying to quickly look up numbers so I could talk with facts, but I couldn't find it. But what numbers are we talking about, right? What are the numbers actually talking about here? It's a very interesting topic, because we're like, oh, the country is full. We have, there's a lot of people. Like, what are we talking about here, right? So I think we've seen that it's more about the lack of the will to welcome these people rather than looking at the numbers. At the same time, we're not looking at the people who are being deported or being sent away. As we are speaking right now, the deportation flights that left yesterday to Haiti and other African countries that are deporting people. Those numbers never come up in the news. Those numbers never come up in the narrative about how many people are being sent away, how many people are locked up or are being pushed back away. Or look at the numbers that people are coming, right? And so that's where we are missing. We should look at it both sides. The clear example of what happened at the border, right? We saw how a system was created very swiftly. United for Ukraine program, Afghan Adjustment Act, all of these amazing programs and resources came out of nowhere. And people were able to skip the line and got into the system and got all established. No offense at all. I appreciate and I really welcome these efforts, but it should be done across the board. So it's the lack of the will towards a particular group of people, right? We don't want Mexicans to come here, taking our jobs. We don't want people to come here, they're criminal, all those narratives. We know them, we've heard about them, right? So it's the lack of will rather than looking at the numbers. Because when I look at what actually happens, I'm like, nah, that's not where the conversation is. It's the lack of will.
Would you kindly join me in, so I think we're going to have one more question because we've come to the end of our time. So who was the first person to have raised their hand? Meet me halfway. I got a long cord, but not that long.
Hola, buenas tardes. Tengo más que nada una pregunta y una observación. Yo soy solicitante de asilo acá en Estados Unidos, tengo apenas un año.
Good afternoon. Thank you for what you have presented. I have a question for you. I'm an asylee. I've only been here for 1 year.
Y una observación.
And I have an observation.
Algo de lo que me he dado cuenta en este tiempo que estoy acá es que hay muchas organizaciones y hay muchas agencias que tienen servicios para los que venimos llegando acá.
So one of the things that I have observed since I've been here is that there are many organizations and many individuals who are providing services for people who are coming here, who are here.
Pero uno de los más grandes problemas es la falta de difusión. Muchas veces ni las mismas organizaciones que uno conoce o a personas dentro de las organizaciones nos pueden acercar esa información.
But one of the biggest problems is that there's a problem of diffusion. A lot of us who come here, we never hear about such services. And so there's a big problem of lack of communication to reach the people who actually need to hear it.
Blanca tiene años batallando con su caso y apenas hoy recibió de una persona del condado esa tarjeta.
So Blanca is an example. She's lived for many years here and she has tried for many years to try to get help. But only today does she actually get a card with somebody where she can go for direct help.
En mi ingreso a los Estados Unidos me acompañó una organización que me canalizó con otra para víctimas de tortura.
So in my own situation, I had the help of an organization that then connected me with somebody else who helped, with another organization that would help victims of torture, like myself.
Y tuve esa fortuna y pude obtener de ellos ayuda en salud mental, en un medical del que no disfrutan otras personas. Yo tengo más de 50 años y tengo entendido que cualquiera arriba de 50 años, independientemente de su estado migratorio, podría tener esa tarjeta.
And I was then given this opportunity to get mental health support in a way that has really helped me, and I understand that people over 50, and I'm over 50, are able to get that, but and Medi-Cal too, but we don't know about it.
Y esa es la observación y la pregunta es, ¿qué falta para que las organizaciones y los líderes de las organizaciones tengan toda la información que es requerida para que las personas se les complique un poco menos el poder incorporarse y participar dentro de la comunidad?
So that was my observation, and my question is, what is necessary to be able to make that information available so that all of us can take opportunities for what's here?
Gracias, señor. Thank you.
answer. Thank you so much for your question. I think I mentioned this earlier in the start of my conversation that, there's a lot of folks, a lot of groups, of course, which is great work, focused more on the big picture rather than the direct impact work that needs to be done, right? And so you're right, there is a lack of information getting to the right people at the right time, right? And that's why I mentioned that's the vision to which I am doing this work. That's why every month I make a trip to the detention center, because while I was detained, I didn't have the information I needed that could help me get through the system, right? That's why people who are living down in Santa Ana, where I was homeless for a month, right, don't have the information about where to go to, who to turn to, right? That's where the work needs to happen, right? Guillermo, at the shelters where we do the Know Your Rights information and Know Your Rights sessions, that's where the work needs to happen. So I tell people all the time who sit in Washington, D.C. or sit in offices and do big policy language, I'm like, if you don't follow me to the detention center, or if you don't follow me to the ground where the work actually happens, then you have no big voice to talk about these changes, right? The Haitian Bridge Alliance, as we speak, is right now at the border welcoming, hundreds of asylum seekers every day, where we provide them with the information they need, where to go to, how to turn, how to stand, so that you can thrive and succeed with your case. That's the most important part of this work, the direct communication with those who are impacted. Because most of the time, when people will stand on these big stages and talk, like our sister, right? They say, oh, there is help, but that help doesn't actually get to her. And that's why I said, our communities, we need to open our doors. We need to not just hear it, but do it. When you hear about this, take it upon you to help just one person this year. Take it upon you to stand the gap for one person. That's what needs to happen. Don't just listen to it. I've been on such panels like this, 100 of them last year. I've talked, but it doesn't end here. And I always tell people, if you listen to me and you clap about my story and you are encouraged about what I say, don't let it end right there. Carry that voice and go and help somebody who needs it, because that's where the impact is. The people who are down there who need the help. So as we talk about this big work here in this space, I'm going to leave from here. I'm going to San Diego tomorrow to help people down at the border and provide the information, because that's where the work is. But of course, at the same time, we need guidance like this to pass out information. So what I'm trying to say is we should always focus on turning towards the community directly. And you can only get to that if you think about, like what Guillermo said, what does justice, what does humanity look like to the people who are involved? It looks like getting the card, getting the information, getting the phone number, getting the direction to find housing, to find legal representation, to find the things that you need, how to do a driver's license, how to do a social security. Those are the basic things that I needed to survive at the time that I came here.
Sure. Yeah, gracias por su pregunta, Ramon, and thank you for your question, Ramon. I think it's a really great one, and we are a new organization, Epic, but this is really what we're trying to do, and I think it is a lot easier to do the work for somebody that they can do themselves, or to assume that it takes a lot more time to listen. And Creator gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, I think for a reason, right? To listen to each other. And I think that's part of the seeing each other differently. That's part of really seeing the shared humanity in one another, is when we listen to each other. And so it has been such an important journey for us to really try to listen to our community. As I mentioned, the vision of really focusing on youth, empowering youth, came out of the parents, the elders, and I think again, not to toot our own horn, and it's not just me, it's many people in here and others not here who have helped us to do this. It's so important to listen to the people most affected, like Daniel's saying, right? To listen and to echo what a lot of other people have said. And so I really appreciate the questions that have been raised, and even to your question earlier, Rosalio. I think it's interesting, you know, how other sectors in the world do this. You know, in the for-profit world, we have corporations that listen to their customers, they listen to their clients. But I think we could take a page out of their books and obviously use it for the benefit of not profit, but for the benefit of our communities, to empower our communities when we do listen to those who we're serving and in solidarity with. So.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Ramon. Gracias, Ramon, for that observation. And we need to do a better job of communicating, Ramon. Tenemos que hacer un mejor comunicación para los inmigrantes. One last point that I want to leave you is going back to Troy's question and what or thought what Daniel was sharing. Do you really think our government does not have the capacity to do a better job at the border to receive migrants more humane and process them more humane? And that the Biden goes, a couple of months ago, he goes to the border. He's seen all the news, all the migrants sleeping outside on the cold in both Juarez and in El Paso, sleeping outside the shelters. He's seen that on the news, and then he's going to Mexico. He stops at El Paso. He goes, what do you guys need? Are you serious? What do you guys need? You're not seeing it in the news? If we were to start another war, we set up a military base in 1 week and a hospital. We're the most powerful and the most powerful nation in the world, and the nation with the most money in the world, and we treat migrants like that. Throw them on the streets in San Diego, where Daniel's going. 3 months ago, they started throwing them in the transit station, Custom Border Patrol. Yes, they released them. We're glad for that. Throwing them on the streets in a transit location with no buildings, no connections to their family, no Wi-Fi. That's where they started throwing the migrants about 3 or 5 months ago. We were part of that response with Lindsay from INDEF, Haitian Bridge Alliance. We had some Methodist churches that had set up as shelter. That's what Custom Border Patrol did in San Diego just recently. Do we really think our government does not have the power and the money to treat people more humane? Of course they do. Of course they do. But that goes to what we have been saying, the indifference, the way you see another human being. Because when Ukraine had the issue, and they were a different color, they right away came up with the money to bring them in as refugees, right? But other communities of colors, not that color, this is how you treat them, yeah? So like Daniel said, treat everyone with humanity and dignity, and don't discriminate or don't exclude them because of their color, because of their gender, because of their faith. Everybody deserves to be affirmed in their dignity.
Sarah, Daniel, Josh, Guillermo, let's offer our thanks. In this 2-day-long Epiphany Festival of Discovery, when we're trying to take January 6th back from the white Christian nationalists 3 years ago, one of the things we're rolling out is the idea of a Canon Lydia Lopez Center for Community Empowerment, which, if fully realized, could come alongside the organizations represented here on the stage to help people who need the information get it on a timely basis. We're committed to that, but I think we've already heard that there are things that churches can begin to do today and tomorrow to use the resources they have to help people from whom we have heard, such as Rafael and Blanca, to get the support they need when they need it. Although our guest from Hilda Solis's office, Daniella Urbina, finally did have to leave, I think we've all been at events like this where the representative of the elected official comes, says their piece, and leaves. Daniella stayed almost the whole time and stayed and helped Blanca on the ground. So if we're in touch with Daniella, I'll find a way to reach out and thank her for doing that. It was surely the best of public service in action. Thank you all for coming. Thanks again to our panelists. Drive carefully, and God bless you, and happy Epiphany. Thank you so much. You're just wonderful, pal.